Insuta was not a loud village. It did not announce itself with tall buildings or wide roads. It sat quietly on red earth, surrounded by trees that had watched generations rise and fall. The village paths were narrow, shaped by bare feet and stubborn time, and every compound carried stories older than the people who lived in them. In Insuta, nothing stayed hidden for long, not joy, not shame, and certainly not cruelty. It was here that Amono lived. She woke up long before the rooster crowed, her body trained by years of routine and fear. The sky was still dark, stars faintly visible, when her feet touched the cold earth of the compound. She picked up the broom and began to sweep, her movements slow and practiced. Each stroke of the broom gathered dust, leaves, and the remnants of yesterday, just as she had done every morning for as long as she could remember. Amono was in her early 30s, but her life had taught her lessons meant for someone much older. Her beauty was quiet, the kind that did not fight for attention. Her face carried calm strength, her eyes deep and thoughtful. But in Insuta, beauty meant nothing without status, and Amono had none. She lived with her late father's parents, Nana Adu and Mama Oki, along with her two younger half-sisters, Omi and Kitty. From the outside, the compound looked ordinary. Inside, it was ruled by pride and bitterness. Nana Adu was a man who believed poverty was the greatest shame a family could carry. He had raised his children with one rule carved deeply into their minds: never marry from the village. To him, village men were failures by birth, trapped by soil and sweat. Mama Oki shared this belief completely. She wore her pride like fine cloth and her cruelty like jewelry. As Amono swept the compound, voices drifted from inside the house. Ami and Kitty were already awake, seated before a cracked mirror placed carefully against the wall. They admired themselves, adjusting their headscarves, rubbing pomade on their lips, laughing softly at their reflections. One day, Ami said, smiling at herself, "A rich man will come from the city and take me far from this place." Kitty nodded eagerly. "A man with a car. Not these village men." They laughed together. Outside, Amono heard every word. She did not react. She never did. When the sun rose fully, Mama Aki stepped out of her room dressed elegantly, her wrapper clean and pressed, gold earrings shining in the morning light. She scanned the compound and frowned. "Amono," she called sharply, after sweeping, "wash the dishes. And hurry. People are watching." "Yes, Mama." Amono replied quietly. She washed the dishes, scrubbing pots until her fingers ached. When she finished, Omi and Kitty dropped their dirty clothes beside her without a word. One dress fell into the water with a splash. "Wash them well," Omi said casually. "I don't want stains." Amono nodded and gathered the clothes. Later, she balanced a heavy basin on her head and began the long walk to the stream. The sun was already hot, beating down on her shoulders. With each step, memories pressed against her chest, memories of a father who had once protected her, of laughter that no longer existed, of a life she had never been allowed to choose. At the stream, she knelt and began washing the clothes, scrubbing fabric against stone. The water rippled softly, carrying away dirt and her silent tears alike. Not far from there, a young man worked tirelessly on another man's land. His name was Bucom. Bucom was known throughout Insuta as a laborer. Strong, well-built, and dependable, he survived by weeding farms, harvesting crops, and doing any honest work offered to him. His hands were rough, his clothes simple, but his character was solid. Still, to most people in the village, he was invisible, noticed only when his strength was needed. That morning, Omi walked along the path near the farmland, her head held high. Bucom noticed her and stopped walking. "Good morning," he greeted respectfully. Omi looked at him with open disdain. "Good morning for who?" she snapped. "You people should know your place." Bucom straightened, confused but calm. "I only wanted to," she waved her hand sharply. "Don't talk to me. If you are looking for a woman, go and find those useless village girls like Amonu. She is your level." The words struck hard. Bucom stood frozen as Omi walked away without another glance. Nearby women who had overheard whispered and laughed. Bucom lowered his head slowly, shame burning deep in his chest. Back at the compound, Amono heard about the insult. Her hands trembled as she stirred soup over the fire. She swallowed hard. She had become the name people used to humiliate others. Days later, Nana Adu summoned Bucom to his compound. "I need my land weeded," Nana Adu said. "It's large." Bucom agreed immediately. Work was work, and he never turned it down. For nearly a week, Bucom worked relentlessly on Nana Adu's land. From early morning until sunset, he cleared weeds under the scorching sun. His palms blistered, his back ached, but he did not complain. When the job was finally done, he returned to the compound to collect his pay. Nana Adu sat calmly on a wooden stool, his walking stick resting beside him. "The money I kept for you," he said slowly, "has been stolen." Bucom felt his heart sink, but he bowed respectfully. "That is unfortunate, sir." Nana Adu studied him closely. "But I can give you something more valuable. Something money cannot buy." Bucom looked up, hope flickering. "What is it, sir?" "My daughter," Nana Adu said. Bucom's breath caught. In his mind, images of Omi and Kitty appeared. This was an opportunity no poor man would dare refuse. "I agree," Bucom said quickly. Nana Adu's expression hardened. "You will marry Amono." Bucom froze. Amono arrived at Bucom's compound just before sunset. The sky burned orange, then slowly darkened, as if the day itself was reluctant to witness what was happening. There were no drums to announce her arrival, no women singing marriage songs, no elders gathered to bless the union. The marriage had been sealed with words spoken in bitterness, not joy. Bucom stood a few steps away as she placed her two small bags on the ground. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was heavy, not awkward, but uncertain. Two strangers tied together by cruelty they had not created. "You can sit," Bucom finally said, pointing to a wooden stool. "Thank you," Amono replied softly. That night, they ate quietly. The food was simple, but Amono served it carefully, as though fear itself hovered nearby. When Bucom finished, she waited until he left the eating area before touching her own food. He noticed, and something in him tightened. The days that followed formed a routine quickly. Amono woke before dawn, swept the compound, fetched water, cooked, and washed clothes. Bucom left early for the farm and returned in the evening. He never raised his voice at her. He never treated her like property. Still, Amono moved as though walking on fragile ground, expecting punishment that never came. One evening, Bucom returned to find water already heated for him. He paused, staring at the calabash. You don't have to wake so early for me, he said. Amonu lowered her eyes. It is what I know how to do. Bucom said nothing, but that night he lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering what kind of home could teach a woman fear so deeply. In Nsuta, life continued as though nothing had changed. Villagers passed Bucom's compound without greeting. Some laughed quietly. Others shook their heads. To them, Amonu had simply moved from one forgotten corner to another. Meanwhile, Omi was living what she believed was her reward. The day she left Nsuta with Duku, her heart raced with excitement. The car alone was enough to convince her she had won. As the village disappeared behind them, she felt no sadness, only pride. The city overwhelmed her at first. Tall buildings, constant noise, bright lights that refused to sleep. Duku rented a small apartment, far from the luxury she imagined, but she told herself it was temporary. After all, wealth did not reveal itself all at once. At first, Duku was kind in public. He introduced her proudly, held her hand, and spoke smoothly. But when they were alone, his patience faded. You village girls don't know how to behave, he said one night when she asked too many questions. Ami laughed it off, determined not to ruin her dream. Back in Nsuta, Amonu began working beside Bucom on the farm. The work was hard, the sun unforgiving, but she did not complain. She learned quickly, her hands blistering as she tilled the land. Bucom watched her carefully. She worked not like someone forced, but like someone determined to survive. You are strong, he said one afternoon. Amonu shrugged. I had no choice. Weeks passed. The silence between them softened. They spoke more, though carefully. Bucom learned that Amonu loved the early morning sky and feared loud voices. Amonu learned that Bucom was patient, observant, and carried wounds he never spoke about. In the city, Omi's illusion began to crack. Money became an issue. Duku complained constantly. One evening, when Omi questioned him, his hand moved faster than her words. The slap stunned her. She stared at him, shocked. I brought you from nothing, he shouted. Don't forget your place. That night, Omi cried quietly, telling herself it was a mistake. It happened again. And again, she learned to hide bruises. She learned silence. Back on the farm, one afternoon changed everything. Bucom's cutlass struck something hard beneath the soil. The sound was wrong. He froze. They dug carefully, hands trembling. What emerged shimmered in the sunlight, gold. For a long moment, neither spoke. Fear and disbelief fought inside them. Cover it, Bucom whispered. They walked quickly, hiding the spot. That night, neither slept. Fear crept into every thought. What if someone saw? What if it was stolen? Over the next weeks, Bucom quietly investigated. The land held more than they first believed. He told no one in Nsuta. Trust was a luxury they could not afford. In the city, Omi's suffering reached its peak. One morning, Duku woke her roughly. Pack your things, he said coldly. Where are we going? She asked. Back to your village, he replied. I am married. You were never anything. The car was a setup. Her world shattered, bruised, humiliated, and discarded, Omi boarded a bus back to Nsuta. She stared out the window, unable to cry. Months passed. Quietly, Bucom and Amonu's lives changed. Wealth arrived without celebration. They moved carefully, leaving Nsuta without announcement. Amono learned what peace felt like. Then, one afternoon, Omi returned to the village. The villagers whispered as she walked through the path, barely recognizable. That same day, a luxury car rode into Nsuta. Inside sat Amono and Bukom. The village held its breath. The day the luxury car entered Nsuta, time seemed to slow. Children stopped playing. Women paused mid-conversation. Men turned from their farms, wiping sweat from their brows as the unfamiliar sound of a powerful engine rolled through the village. Cars rarely came to Nsuta, and when they did, they never looked like this. The vehicle gleamed under the sun, polished black, moving with confidence along the narrow village road. Dust rose behind it like a reluctant witness. Villagers whispered as it passed, "Who could this be? Is it a government official? Maybe a rich man from the city?" No one imagined the truth. Earlier that same morning, Omi had arrived in Nsuta. She walked slowly, dragging her feet as if each step required permission from the earth itself. Her clothes were worn, her hair unkempt, her face bruised and swollen. Some villagers stared without recognition. Others looked away, uncomfortable. When she reached her family's compound, Mama Oki was seated outside, sorting maize. She glanced up and frowned. "Who is that?" she muttered. Omi stopped a few steps away. "Mama." Mama Oki squinted, confused. Nana Adu stepped closer, his walking stick tapping against the ground. It took several heartbeats before recognition struck Omi. Mama Oki gasped. The scream that followed drew neighbors to the compound. Mama Oki rushed forward, grabbing Omi's shoulders, then recoiling at the sight of her bruises. Nana Adu stood frozen, disbelief etched across his face. "What happened to you?" Mama Oki cried. Omi collapsed onto the ground, sobbing. Words came out broken, tangled with shame and pain. She spoke of the city, of Duku, of the lies, the beatings, the rejection. Each word cut deeper than the last. The compound fell silent. For the first time in years, Nana Adu said nothing. Pride had abandoned him, leaving only confusion and fear. Mama Oki wept openly, rocking back and forth. As villagers whispered nearby, shame crept into the compound like an unwanted guest. It was then that the sound of the approaching car grew louder. Heads turned. The car slowed and stopped directly in front of Nana Adu's compound. Dust settled slowly, revealing the vehicle in full glory. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The door opened. A well-dressed man stepped out first. He stood tall, composed, his movements calm and assured. It took a moment for recognition to settle. "Is that Bukom?" Someone whispered. Gasps followed. Then the second door opened. A woman stepped out, elegant, confident, radiant. For a second, no one spoke. The woman's face was familiar, yet unfamiliar at the same time. Her posture was straight, her clothes refined, her presence commanding. "Ammonia." Mama Oki whispered, barely audible. The word tilted. Nana Adu staggered backward, gripping his walking stick. His legs weakened as understanding crashed into him. The girl he had traded for unpaid labor stood before him, transformed, not just by wealth, but by dignity. Villagers pushed closer, eyes wide, mouths open. Some pointed. Others shook their heads in disbelief. Bukom walked calmly around the car and opened the door for Amonu, offering his hand. She accepted it with a small smile. The gesture alone spoke louder than words. They stood together, silent, observing the faces that once ignored them. Mama Oki fell to her knees. Amonu, she cried. Forgive us. Amonu looked at her for a long moment. Memory searched years of insults, labor, silence, tears. Her chest tightened, but her face remained calm. We came to greet you, Amonu said softly. And to say goodbye. The words struck harder than any insult ever had. Nana Adu lowered his head, shame bending his spine. Amonu stepped forward. I forgive you, she said, her voice steady. But forgiveness does not mean returning to what destroyed me. Silence followed. She turned away from the compound.